Desire has always been the most misunderstood language of the human soul. It's not evil. It's not weakness. It's energy, raw, untamed, unrefined potential. Every empire, every invention, every revolution began as desire. Every destruction, every betrayal, every fall, also desire. The same fire that warms can burn. The same force that creates life can consume it. The question is not how to control desire. The question is how to understand it, how to harness what it's trying to show you instead of being enslaved by what it demands. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, the moment a person stops pretending to be good and starts integrating what is true. Because beneath every craving is a message. Desire is not random, it's a map. It points towards something you have not yet mastered. It reveals the distance between who you are and who you could become. When you try to suppress it, it festers. When you indulge it unconsciously, it enslaves you. But when you face it, when you sit in its heat without flinching, it transforms. That is the secret few ever learn. What you resist, you empower. What you face, you reclaim. We live in a world that has forgotten this truth. A world that confuses repression with morality, indulgence with freedom, and addiction with self-expression. A world that teaches you to fear your own instincts, to medicate them, distract them, bury them under screens, noise, and false validation. But the instincts don't disappear. They wait. They lurk beneath your achievements and politeness, whispering through the cracks of your composure. They haunt you because they are you, the unclaimed parts of your humanity begging to be reconciled. Every time you deny the power of your own impulses, you split yourself in two, the version you present to the world, and the one that waits in shadow, silently shaping your choices. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Desire is one of those unconscious forces, primal, powerful, unavoidable. So instead of trying to kill it, you must learn to transmute it. That's the art of the warrior philosopher, the mystic, the disciplined mind, the transformation of instinct into purpose. Alchemy of the spirit, turning lust into creativity, fear into clarity, hunger into drive. But to do that, you must first stop judging the part of you that wants. Because judgment is what keeps you chained. Every time you shame your own desire, you give it more power. You feed it in secret, and it grows wild in the dark. Awareness, not judgment, is what dissolves its control. When you bring your attention to the raw energy beneath desire, you begin to feel its neutrality. It's just life force, the same current that builds galaxies and moves oceans. The question is whether that current flows through you consciously or unconsciously. If it's unconscious, it controls you. If it's conscious, it becomes creation. Think of it like electricity. The same voltage that powers a city can burn it to the ground. The difference lies in structure, in direction, in mastery. The disciplined mind doesn't suppress desire. It channels it. It turns chaos into creation. The modern man or woman, however, has forgotten this discipline. We chase sensation as if it were nourishment, confusing intensity with intimacy, attention with love, escape with peace. We are a species addicted to stimulation, terrified of silence because silence exposes how fragmented we've become. But stillness is where the alchemy happens. When you stop reacting, when you let the impulse rise without feeding it, something extraordinary unfolds. Energy separates from craving. You begin to see that what you wanted wasn't the object of desire, it was the feeling of aliveness you thought it would give you. That spark, that rush, that fullness that was never outside you. It was your own energy reflecting back. Desire, at its root, is not about possession, it's about connection. It's your spirit reaching for expansion, for union with something greater than itself. And the moment you understand that, desire transforms from a prison into a compass. It begins to guide you toward creation, not consumption. This is what the mystics and philosophers of every age meant when they spoke of sublimation, the transformation of lower impulses into higher expression. It's not denial, it's refinement. It's how Michelangelo carved divinity out of stone, how warriors forged purpose from chaos, how thinkers like Jung, Nietzsche, and Rumi turned passion into insight that still moves the world. When you begin this transformation, you realize that discipline isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. It's the art of choosing where your energy flows. It's the power to turn your instincts from chaos into architecture, to build from your hunger instead of being devoured by it. Every great mind in history understood this. The Stoics, the monks, the mystics, they weren't afraid of desire. They studied it. They made it their teacher. They understood that passion without awareness leads to destruction, but awareness without passion leads to stagnation. The goal is not to kill your fire, it's to forge it. And this is the balance most people never reach, because it requires both self-honesty and restraint. It requires sitting with your chaos long enough to learn its language. Most will run. They will choose comfort, distraction, or indulgence. But those who stay, those who stare into the hunger and listen, discover something sacred. They discover that the force they feared was never darkness. It was power raw, creative, divine power waiting to be given purpose. To master yourself is not to become cold, detached, or robotic. It's to become deeply alive, but in control of your own current. It's to feel everything, the hunger, the passion, the drive, and still move from consciousness, not compulsion. That is the essence of mastery, not the absence of desire, but the transformation of it into something higher. When you reach that state, temptation loses its grip. You no longer chase highs because you found something greater presence. You no longer seek escape because you've learned how to inhabit yourself completely. You realize that every impulse, no matter how wild, was a messenger leading you back to your own wholeness. And in that realization, you stop fearing your own depths. You stop dividing yourself into light and dark. You understand that every part of you, even the parts you once called sin or weakness, were never your enemies. They were the unspoken languages of life trying to reach you. That is what it means to become sovereign over yourself, to know your fire, to respect it, to wield it with consciousness and compassion. You will never control desire by fighting it, but you can master it by understanding what it's asking for: truth, aliveness, creation, connection. And once you learn to give it those things consciously, you'll realize that the battle you've been fighting all your life was never against desire. It was against your own misunderstanding of what it truly was. When understanding deepens, you begin to see that desire was never meant to be conquered or feared. It was meant to evolve. The energy that once demanded satisfaction begins to ask for expression. It wants to move through your voice, your art, your leadership, your love, your purpose. The same current that once tempted you outward now pulls you inward, toward creation rather than consumption. You begin to sense how all human greatness, every discovery, every masterpiece, every act of courage was born from this exact transformation. Civilization itself is the result of desire refined through consciousness. The world was built not by those who avoided their instincts, but by those who transmuted them into something higher. Fire was once fear. Now it is warmth. Hunger was once chaos. Now it is innovation. The same energy that destroys, when directed by awareness, becomes evolution. This realization changes how you perceive the word discipline. You start to see that discipline is not a cage, it is a channel. It doesn't restrict freedom. It refines it. It gives form to power. A river without banks is a flood. With structure, it becomes life-giving. The disciplined mind is not suppressing energy, it is sculpting it. You begin to notice something profound. The more awareness you bring to your instincts, the less they control you. They don't disappear, they integrate. What once felt like chaos becomes a hum, a steady undercurrent of vitality that powers your focus, your clarity, your creation. You no longer waste energy fighting your impulses because they've become allies. And this integration brings a deeper strength, a kind of quiet dominance over yourself. You no longer swing between repression and indulgence. You move from a center that cannot be pulled by either extreme. You can feel desire rise within you, observe its direction, and choose its purpose. That choice, the ability to direct, not deny, is the essence of inner power. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating every aspect of the self. The unconscious impulses that once haunted you become conscious tools. What was once shame becomes insight. What was once chaos becomes command. The person who learns this no longer needs control, they embody it. And that embodiment changes your relationship with life itself. Because desire was never just about pleasure, it was about participation. It's life reaching through you, wanting to experience itself more deeply. When you align with that, every moment becomes an act of communion. Eating, creating, breathing, moving, everything becomes sacred because you no longer approach it from hunger but from fullness. You begin to understand that true strength doesn't come from denying what you are. It comes from owning it so completely that nothing can manipulate it. The person who has integrated their instincts cannot be bribed, seduced, or broken. They move through the world with a kind of calm intensity that unsettles those still enslaved by their impulses. That calm is power, not the loud, forceful kind, but the magnetic kind. The kind that commands without words. The kind that turns heads not through display, but through presence. Because presence is the final form of energy mastered. It is desire transmuted into awareness, movement distilled into stillness. And it's here that you start to understand what real freedom feels like. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, that's just chaos disguised as choice. Real freedom is the ability to feel everything without being ruled by anything. To experience the full range of human emotion and still act from consciousness. At this level, desire becomes sacred again. It ceases to be a problem to solve and becomes a force to honor. It reminds you that you are alive, that you carry within you the same creative energy that moves galaxies. It teaches you that your task was never to kill the fire, but to tend it to make it burn with purpose instead of impulse. And when you master that, you notice that life begins to respond differently. Opportunities, relationships, and synchronicities start aligning with your internal coherence. You attract not what you chase, but what you are. Your energy no longer leaks into distraction. It radiates into direction. You start to see how every moment of temptation in your life was really a test of stewardship, a question from the universe. Can you hold this energy without losing yourself? Most people answer unconsciously. They either collapse into indulgence or retreat into repression. But the few who can stand in the middle, who can feel everything and remain still, become conduits of transformation. This is the secret of those who radiate strength effortlessly. They are not suppressing anything, they are containing everything. Their calmness is not emptiness, it is mastery. You can sense it when they walk into a room, that quiet gravity, that electric stillness. They've learned the secret that ancient mystics, samurai, and philosophers all discovered in their own language, that energy obeys the one who can remain unmoved. And that's when desire itself begins to shift its allegiance. It no longer drags you outward. It turns inward, upward. It becomes devotion to growth, to truth, to creation, to mastery. It becomes sacred fuel, the fire that no longer burns you but lights the path ahead. You start to realize that what you once called temptation was simply undeveloped potential. Every craving was a seed waiting for consciousness to cultivate it. Every impulse was an invitation to become more whole. And once you understand this, you stop fearing your own depths. You stop apologizing for being human, because the human is not an obstacle to the divine, it's the instrument of it. Desire, when refined through awareness, is how the divine learns to create through you. This is what it means to become sovereign, to live in alignment with your instincts, your intellect, your spirit, not as enemies, but as one unified field. You no longer battle your own nature, you harness it. And in that harmony, you find what every seeker has been chasing. Not control, not suppression, but mastery born of understanding. You don't overcome desire. You elevate it. You give it purpose. And in doing so, you stop being a prisoner of your impulses and become the architect of your own evolution. And once you reach this level of integration, something even deeper begins to unfold, a truth so subtle that only silence can hold it. You realize that what you once called desire was never about acquiring, consuming, or possessing anything external. It was the soul's way of calling you back to itself. Every longing was a mirror, every craving a reflection of the same message. Return inward. It becomes clear that desire was not the enemy. Ignorance was. You had mistaken the signal for the source, the reflection for the reality. The deeper impulse beneath every form of wanting, whether it wore the mask of ambition, pleasure, validation, or control, was the yearning to feel whole. But wholeness was never out there. It was the awareness from which the yearning arose. This realization changes how you interpret longing itself. You stop trying to fulfill it and start listening to it. You stop trying to satisfy every impulse and instead let it reveal its root. Beneath every I want is an I am waiting to be remembered. Every time you trace a desire back to its essence, you discover it was never about the object at all. It was about consciousness trying to recognize itself through experience. And this is where you begin to taste a completely different kind of freedom, not the freedom that comes from discipline or strength, but the freedom that comes from understanding. When you see that desire is not a command, but a communication, you can listen to it without being ruled by it. You can feel its intensity and remain still. You can let the energy rise, transform, and dissolve without attaching to it. You become the witness rather than the warrior. This witnessing is the birth of wisdom. It's where instinct and intelligence merge. It's when you realize that you don't need to destroy your lower nature to awaken your higher one. You only need to illuminate it. Awareness alone purifies. The light of consciousness dissolves distortion by seeing it clearly. Nothing more is required. From this clarity, your relationship with pleasure transforms completely. You stop chasing it compulsively because you've discovered something greater: serenity. Pleasure is momentary. Serenity is eternal. Pleasure depends on conditions. Serenity exists before them. Pleasure is consumption. Serenity is comprehension. Once you've tasted the peace that comes from understanding your own nature, no external experience can compete. And it's not that you reject beauty or passion, you engage them more deeply but without attachment. You can experience joy without dependence, attraction without obsession, connection without ownership. You don't cling to the experience because you understand that the experience itself was never the destination, it was the reminder. Every pleasure was a signpost pointing back to awareness. At this stage, you begin to live with what the mystics called equanimity. It's not indifference, it's participation without distortion. It's the ability to move through every polarity of existence, joy and pain, love and loss, craving and contentment, without losing your center. You start to feel like the still axis around which the world spins. The external may change, but the internal remains unshaken. And this equilibrium gives rise to a new kind of magnetism. People sense something in you, not dominance, not suppression, but depth. The quiet certainty of someone who no longer needs anything from the world, yet loves it completely. You no longer move through life grasping for experience. Experience flows to you. The energy that once leaked through unconscious craving now radiates as presence. This is the state the ancients referred to as containment. Your energy no longer disperses outward through desire. It circulates within, feeding consciousness itself. You become a generator of vitality, a vessel of balance. The creative force that once drove you outward now creates inward. It refines perception, heightens intuition, sharpens clarity. The mind becomes luminous, the body tranquil, the spirit unshakable. You begin to see the entire human story differently. Civilizations rise, its wars, its innovations, its decadence, all of it, a reflection of collective desire evolving through form. Humanity has been trying to understand its own energy since the beginning, projecting it into art, religion, power, and pleasure. Every age was an experiment in what we do with this fire. And now, for the first time, you see that fire clearly not as good or bad, but as sacred. And when something becomes sacred, you treat it with reverence. You no longer misuse energy because you understand its purpose. You don't waste it on conflict, competition, or shallow indulgence. You invest it into creation, truth, and consciousness. Every thought, every action becomes an offering to awareness. You start living as a custodian of energy rather than a consumer of it. And that responsibility brings peace because stewardship replaces struggle. You no longer wrestle with your impulses. You guide them. You don't need to suppress temptation. You outgrow it. You don't seek transcendence anymore because you are living it. The divine you once looked for in rituals, doctrines, or fleeting highs is now felt in every breath, every heartbeat, every act of still attention. It's here, in this quiet mastery, that you finally understand what desire was trying to teach you all along. That energy, once refined through awareness, becomes love. Not sentimental love, but cosmic love. The love that sees everything as itself. The love that no longer wants to possess, but to participate. The love that gives without need, that moves without agenda, that creates without ego. And from that love arises the final form of power. Not domination, not control, but harmony. The power to move with life instead of against it. To feel its currents and direct them effortlessly the way a master sailor reads the wind. You are no longer fighting storms, you are part of the ocean. You are no longer chasing fire, you are its steady flame. This is where the journey ends, not in conquest, but in surrender. Not in ascetic denial, but in reverent participation. You no longer need to control anything, because control was the language of fear, and fear has dissolved into understanding. You live now as pure awareness, luminous, grounded, balanced. Desire has fulfilled its purpose. It has led you back home to the source from which it was born. And in that homecoming, you realize what all of this was about. That the fire you feared was never meant to be extinguished. It was meant to be understood. You do not rise above your humanity, you sanctify. You do not conquer desire, you awaken through it. And in that awakening, you discover the truth that ends all seeking. You were never meant to control the fire within you. You were meant to remember that you are the fire. And once that recognition dawns, that you are the fire, everything you once thought was spiritual becomes ordinary. And everything ordinary becomes sacred. The line between the mystical and the mundane erases itself. Washing your hands feels as profound as prayer. The rhythm of your breath becomes a mantra older than language. You no longer practice awareness. You are awareness moving through form. The illusion of progress fades. You stop striving for higher states of consciousness because you see that consciousness has no hierarchy. There is no higher or lower. There is only depth, only refinement, only infinite variation of the same field of being. The tree, the storm, the human, the silence, all of them are expressions of the same underlying intelligence, each carrying its own note in the eternal song. And now you listen differently. You listen with the whole body, not with ears, but with presence. You begin to notice that existence speaks in rhythm, not words. The wind has tone, the night has weight. Every moment carries a vibration, and when you are still enough, you can feel its meaning without translation. You realize that silence was never empty, it was speaking the entire time. The more you merge with this awareness, the more transparent the self becomes. You stop identifying as the person who is experiencing and begin to sense yourself as the space in which experience happens. You are not the wave that rises and falls, you are the ocean that allows it. You are not the flame that flickers, you are the light that makes it visible. The boundaries that once defined you begin to blur, not into confusion, but into clarity. You are both the observer and the observed, the mirror and the reflection, the dancer and the dance. And with this realization, fear begins to vanish not because you fight it, but because you see through it. Fear only exists when you believe yourself to be something that can be lost. But when you know that what you are cannot end, the entire architecture of anxiety collapses. You become fearless, not through bravado, but through truth. You move through life with an ease that feels almost otherworldly. You can meet chaos without panic, uncertainty without resistance, loss without collapse, because you understand that the ground of existence has never shifted, only your perspective did. This freedom gives rise to an entirely new kind of creativity, not the creativity of ambition, but of revelation. You don't decide what to make anymore. Creation simply flows through you. The brush paints, the words write, the voice speaks, all as if guided by something greater, something effortlessly precise. You realize that you were never the author, you were the instrument, and the universe, through you, composes itself anew. And this effortless expression becomes your way of living. You no longer need meaning, you generate it. Every act becomes art, every silence becomes music. You start to understand why the sages smiled without explanation. Not because they had answers, but because they finally saw that there were no questions. The human mind, once obsessed with knowing, relaxes into wonder. You stop needing certainty because you realize that mystery is the natural language of existence. You stop chasing perfection because you see that perfection was always the present moment, exactly as it is. The flower doesn't strain to bloom, nor does the sun apologize for setting. Why should consciousness apologize for its own evolution? This surrender births the deepest kind of peace, the peace that doesn't depend on circumstance. It's the peace of a flame that flickers but never doubts its fire. You can lose everything, your plans, your titles, your relationships, and still remain whole. Because your wholeness is not something the world can give or take. It's the essence beneath all forms, untouched by change. And as you live from that essence, something miraculous happens. You stop needing the world to validate you, and paradoxically, the world begins to reflect your peace back to you. People feel lighter in your presence. They start to awaken not because you preach, but because your silence reminds them of their own. Your stillness becomes contagious. This is how transformation ripples through the collective, not through revolution or domination, but through resonance. A single person rooted in awareness shifts the field around them more than 1,000 lost in noise. You begin to understand that the true purpose of awakening was never self-liberation alone. It was collective healing. Your awareness becomes medicine for the unconscious field of humanity. And so you live as both individual and infinite, a soul with a story, but a story written on the fabric of eternity. You still experience pain, but it doesn't imprison you. You still feel emotion, but it doesn't define you. You still move through change, but you are never moved by it. You've become what the ancient mystics called the unmoved mover, the still point around which the whole wheel of existence turns. There is no longer a difference between doing and being. Every action arises from stillness. Every stillness vibrates with potential action. You live as pure coherence energy that wastes nothing, consciousness that fractures nowhere. The old dualities, success and failure, gain and loss, sin and virtue collapse into one truth. Everything is experience, and all experience serves awakening. At this point, language begins to fail, because what you are living cannot be captured in words. It can only be felt. The intellect bows to the immensity of being, and all philosophy dissolves into gratitude. Gratitude, not as practice, but as nature, gratitude for the chance to exist at all, to feel, to witness, to awaken. You realize that the journey you took through desire, discipline, and transformation was not a climb, but a spiral. You kept returning to the same center, each time clearer, deeper, truer, and that center was never somewhere to arrive. It was who you've been all along. And as this awareness settles, you laugh a soft, knowing laugh, the kind that comes from seeing the simplicity behind the cosmic theater. You laugh because you finally understand that nothing was missing, nothing was wrong, and nothing needed to be fixed. Desire was the beginning. Awareness was the return. And love is what remains. Now, there is no goal. There is no path. There is only this, the endless unfolding of consciousness, alive through you, alive as you. You've stopped asking how to control your nature because you've become one with it. You've stopped asking how to find peace because peace became your nature. You've stopped asking what life means because life itself is the meaning. You breathe, you exist, and that quietly, completely is enlightenment itself. And so it all falls silent, not the silence of absence, but the silence that holds everything, the hum beneath thought, the pulse beneath sound, the infinite breath that never began and never ends. You realize that this right here is the final lesson. Not transcendence, not escape, but the full circle of returning to what has always been. You feel it, the simplicity of it all, the lightness of no longer needing to seek, to strive, to prove, to become. You have burned through the illusion that there was something wrong with being human, something impure about having instincts, something shameful about wanting to live. You see now that life itself is sacred precisely because it contains everything, the chaos and the calm, the shadow and the light, the longing and the release. And now, at last, you stop separating them. You stop dividing your soul into holy and unholy, spiritual and earthly, divine and human. You see that they were never opposites, only reflections of the same truth seen from different levels of awareness. The divine was never up there. It was here in the hands, the heart, the heartbeat, the hunger, the fire within you, the one you once feared, has become your center. It no longer consumes, it illuminates. It no longer drives you blindly, it guides you quietly. You no longer try to control it, because you have remembered what it is, the same fire that ignites stars, the same force that spins galaxies, the same energy that whispered you into being. And in that recognition, you finally understand the secret of all creation. You were never separate from it. You were never outside the story. You are the story, written in light, spoken in motion, sung through time. You are the universe remembering itself through form, exploring its own depth through the miracle of consciousness. This is the liberation the sages spoke of. Not the end of experience, but the end of resistance. Not the destruction of desire, but its purification into devotion. Not the conquest of the self, but its transmutation into awareness. You do not become detached from life. You fall in love with it so completely that you cannot find where you end and it begins. You can feel it now, that stillness, vast and alive, stretching through every heartbeat. You have become both the observer and the observed, the flame and the light it casts. There is no battle left to fight. There is only this serenity, this vast and unshakable knowing that everything, every mistake, every triumph, every ache was leading you here. You look around and realize the world has not changed, but your sight has. The same faces, the same sky, the same breath, but now everything glows with significance. Every leaf trembles with intelligence. Every moment hums with the same unspoken word, remember. You are not here to escape the fire. You are here to burn beautifully, to live with depth, to love with precision, to walk through existence as both student and embodiment of its truth. You are here to carry the stillness of eternity into the noise of time, to remind others, not through teaching, but through being, that the light they seek is the one seeing through their own eyes. And so you live on, not as a seeker, but as awareness made visible. You breathe softly, speak deliberately, act with reverence. The world still moves around you, but it cannot move through you without passing through your stillness. This is what it means to master yourself, not domination, not perfection, but presence. The full acceptance of what is, without resistance, without separation, without need. And as the final breath of this understanding settles in, you feel it, the quiet smile of existence itself, recognizing itself through you, the fire, the body, the soul, the silence, all one. And with that, you realize the truth that ends every question and begins every life anew. You were never meant to extinguish your fire. You were meant to learn how to burn consciously. And now you do. You walk on steady, unshaken, luminous, a living flame of awareness moving through eternity.